Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Look, if you are staring down a massive research project right now and you're just feeling totally overwhelmed by where to even begin, well, you are in exactly the right place. Consider this your interactive, step-by-step guide to taking a vague, passing interest and transforming it into a complex, inquiry-based research project. Because, finding a research question really shouldn't just be about checking a box to get a grade. It's about building a fundamentally solid argument. So, let's get into it.
Today, we're going to hit 5 main steps. First up, rescuing your curiosity. Second, we'll break down inquiry-based research. Third, we'll figure out what actually makes a good question. Fourth, drafting your working questions. And finally, mastering your scope.
All right, step 1, rescuing your curiosity.
Before we can build a great research question, we actually have to take a step back. The authors of our source text bring up a friend who calls his smartphone the wonder killer. And honestly, that is so spot on. Think about it. Technology gives us incredibly fast, easy access to answers, but it often paints a really one-dimensional portrait of human knowledge. Like, if you wonder if spiders hibernate, you type it in, you get a quick yes or no, and you just move on. Sustained, lingering curiosity is fading because we almost never have to sit with a question anymore.
So, I gotta ask, and I want you to actually pause and think about this for your own project. When was the last time you experienced sustained curiosity? True research absolutely requires rejecting those easy surface-level answers you get from a 2-second search. It demands that you embrace an inquisitive fascination. You really need to find a topic that makes you want to dig deeper, simply because your own enthusiasm is going to directly translate into the quality of your writing.
Moving right along to Section 2, Inquiry-Based Research Explained.
This brings us to a huge, foundational mindset shift. In non-inquiry-based research, you basically begin with a pre-decided answer, and then you just go hunt for evidence to back it up. You've probably written papers like this, right? It's 2 a.m., the deadline is in a few hours, and you've already decided on your thesis before you've read a single source. Yeah, we've all been there. But inquiry-based research completely flips that sequence. You begin with a question. You review a wide, diverse range of evidence, and only then do you develop an answer. It's motivated by a genuine curiosity to learn something, rather than just checking off a requirement to prove a stance you already held.
Think of it like a classic murder mystery. If you're doing non-inquiry research, you simply assume the butler did it. You walk into the room, and you literally only look for clues that confirm his guilt. And you'll probably find them. But what if the butler is innocent? In an inquiry-based investigation, you look at all the clues first, completely without assumptions, and you let the evidence point you to the culprit. If you just assume the butler did it from the start, you're blinding yourself to other possibilities and silencing important alternative voices.
And that brings us to a massive pitfall you have to avoid: confirmation bias. If your research process only involves seeking out information that you already agree with, you've completely short-circuited the learning process. Genuine learning relies on challenging, expanding, and sometimes really complicating your current worldview. Remember, if you're truly doing inquiry-based research, your thesis should absolutely not be set in stone before you begin. You've got to stay flexible and be totally prepared to pivot if the evidence takes you somewhere else.
Which leads us to Section 3, what actually makes a good question?
Now that we're committed to keeping an open mind, what does a solid destination look like? Consider this your ultimate checklist for success. A good research question has to be answerable, sure, but not easily answered by a quick search. It needs to establish clear, tight parameters. It has to matter to someone, meaning your path of inquiry actually needs some stakes. And finally, it has to allow you to say something new. You don't have to be, completely groundbreaking and win a Nobel Prize, but you definitely shouldn't just be regurgitating old facts. Your project should demand a complex, informed answer that you synthesize from your own perspective.
Okay, Section 4, drafting your working questions.
Look, finding that perfect golden question almost never happens on the first try. Instead, you're going to iterate through working questions. Notice how this progression takes a really low-stakes topic and just continually raises the bar. We start with a broad interest, Vietnamese food and culture. The first working question is simply, what do people eat in Vietnam? Way too easy. So we revise it. What does Vietnamese food reflect about Vietnamese culture? That's better, but still a bit vague. Finally, we land on our revised research question. How does Vietnamese cuisine reflect a history of colonialism? You can instantly hear how that final version is highly specific, has real historical stakes, and demands a deeply complex answer.
Here's another really cool example of this exact progression. We start with world religion. The first attempt is, what is the role of religion in the Middle East? Too broad. Next,
How has religion influenced politics in the Middle East in the last 50 years? Much better, right? It adds a clear time frame. But look at this final revision. How has religion's influence on government impacted the day-to-day lives of Qatari citizens? Zooming in on such a highly specific scope, going from the entire Middle East down to the daily lives of citizens in one specific country forces you into much deeper, much more critical thinking.
Let's look at a quick case study from the source text to see this in action. A student named Ahmed started with some broad interests. He drafted a working question about who is most vulnerable to police violence. But when he did some preliminary reading, he realized the answers came way too easily. Like, the statistics were already out there. He wasn't really saying anything new. And this is exactly why you have to remain flexible. When his initial answers came too fast, Ahmed actively looked for a new angle, pivoting his focus to ask whether anti-racist police trainings over the last 30 years have actually been effective. By shifting gears, he discovered a path of inquiry that was genuinely fresh and totally right for exploration.
Finally, Section 5, Mastering Your Scope.
If you're sitting there struggling to move your working question into a final, complex research question, this right here is your tactical step. Think of your topic like a soundboard with 4 main dials you can adjust: time, place, population, and connections. You can intentionally complicate, narrow, or broaden your working questions just by tweaking any of these specific dimensions. Let's look at exactly how this works in practice.
Let's say you're looking at a hypothetical project on national marijuana legalization. Adjusting these dials radically alters your entire project. If you twist the time dial to be more broad, suddenly you're looking at a 100-year history. If you crank the place dial down to just a single state, or turn it all the way up to the international level, it fundamentally changes the research you have to do. You're no longer just asking a basic yes or no question, you are targeting a very specific context.
And the same goes for the population and connections dials. You could narrow the population down to exclusively medical users. Or, actually, you could adjust the connections dial to explore how legalization intersects with addiction rates, or the local economy, or crime statistics. Playing with these specific dimensions pretty much guarantees that you won't just repeat old facts. Instead, you'll be synthesizing a completely unique standpoint tailored to your specific scope, which makes for a much, much stronger argument.
Armed with this whole framework, it's time for you to take some action. I want you to think about the last thing that genuinely pulled you down an internet rabbit hole. Seriously, challenge yourself to go look at a random Wikipedia article right now, or just scroll intentionally through your own social media feed until you find a topic that surprises you. Find that rabbit hole. Rescue your sustained curiosity from the wonder killer, use those dials of scope to narrow your focus, and start building your own fundamentally solid research question. So what unknown territory are you going to map out next?